And what I have noticed over my practice, but also seems to be just expanding so much in the world, is people tuning into their bodies and noticing that there's more going on than just what we think is happening. So we have actually this wisdom inside of us that lives in our bodies that we haven't necessarily been trained or even encouraged to tune into. And I think that's true. I mean, even just on an emotional level, but beyond the emotional level is sort of this energy that exists.
Hello, and welcome back to You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Julie Johnson. I am the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions. We are a mental health counseling agency here in Iowa, serving telehealth sessions, in-office sessions at any of our 6 locations across Iowa, also in the schools out here in Iowa doing mental health therapy.
And I'm Chrissa. I am the vice president in charge of our BHIS department. So BHIS stands for Behavioral Health Intervention Services, and we go in-home and work with children on different behavioral skills that they set with a therapist in an assessment. So we can see clients telehealth, like Julie said, or in office, or in school, or in the home, all across the state of Iowa as well. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
So we post on Sunday nights, 5 o'clock Central Time. So batch up that laundry or meal prepping or whatever task you hate doing. Do that once a week and go ahead and put on the podcast. That gives you the entire week to get set up with a counselor or to call your counselor if you haven't talked to your counselor in a little bit. Okay, so we have a guest here today with us. We've got Stephanie Ressler here with us today. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. So I'm going to brag on Stephanie a little bit. So Stephanie is an intuitive life coach, but also has a background in counseling and psychology. So she has been able to utilize those professional skills, but to do a little bit more of a holistic, spiritual type of practice. So blending that mental health service and an ability to work with the mental health portion and the psychology part, and blend that with the spiritual mind and body. And so we're excited to hear about those ways of healing, those other methods of healing that you've been able to weave into your practice. So Stephanie does individual work. She does work with people online. So no matter where you are in the world, you could work online with Stephanie. And really, it sounds like your practice is just really about allowing people to experience the world the way that they experience it, and to be able to kind of be a guide walking with people as they go through, the ups and downs of life and what it is to be a human, which is sometimes great and sometimes not great. So it sounds like you're really focused on that individual service for your individual people that you work with. So Stephanie, what am I missing? Tell me more about who you are, what you do, and where we can find you.
No, I mean, that's a great intro. That's a good overview of things. Yeah, I guess I love counseling. I love it. I think it's an amazing opportunity. I love to be exchanging energy with people. I think it's such a privilege, but it's also such a magical space. What's happening between individuals when they're interacting in that capacity is really quite special. I didn't necessarily want to leave the counseling field in particular, but like you said, I had an interest in some of these other kind of more spiritual components that are happening. Well, I think we see it a lot in the collective. There's this kind of shift where people are starting to open up a little bit differently, see themselves differently, see the world differently. And I really, really have an interest in tuning into that space. And I just feel like with the life coaching, I have an opportunity to pull in some different kinds of modalities that address the mind, and sort of the more conscious level, but then also some deeper, more energetic and then unconscious layers of things.
Yeah, you've brought up, you've mentioned this energy shifting and energy exchange. Tell us more about that and how you use that, this idea and this concept. Because when we hear that, I think a lot of us go, "Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you're talking about." But it sounds like what you do is really help people to intentionally use it and be intentional about how they're using it, how they're channeling it, what they're putting out, and what they're taking in as well. So, can you tell us more about that?
One of the things that I think has been shifting over time, and I don't know if you see this in your own work, but I mean, this isn't necessarily new stuff, but I think for so long we were trained to kind of always be tuning into our thinking mind, to really be paying attention to how we're thinking, what seems logical, what are these sort of logical steps in life. And what I have noticed over my practice, but also seems to be just expanding so much in the world, is people tuning into their bodies and noticing that there's more going on than just what we think is happening. So we have actually this wisdom inside of us that lives in our bodies that we haven't necessarily been trained or even encouraged to tune into. And I think that's true. I mean, even just on an emotional level, but beyond the emotional level is sort of this energy that exists inside of everybody. But yeah, like for me, I don't think that I've it's like that the experience of actually tuning into your emotions has been seen as scary or something to avoid or to something to like push down or to take away. Whereas what we're learning now, what we're seeing is that it's this emotional experience that actually holds all of this wisdom. And so it's, yeah, kind of bringing that out to the surface, but then also looking at what's below that, what's beyond just the emotional, sort of the visceral stuff, but what is the information and the wisdom that lies even beneath those experiences. So I think we've got all of that individually inside of us, but then in terms of group work, which is also something that I love. I'm a huge fan of something called circle process, where you're sort of it's a little bit like group therapy, but it's different. It's not group therapy, but still sort of the energy that happens when you have groups of people who are together who choose to tune in to something more authentic and real and choose to allow that to be expressed and seen. There's something really powerful and really, really essential in number one, witnessing other people, learning from other people's internal experience, but then also, of course, the opportunity to be witnessed as your whole self. So there's just, to me, I feel like in the collective all around me, there's this expressed desire to want to connect more deeply, both with ourselves and with other people. It's like people are longing for authentic connection, but it takes a little bit of a trust and a little bit of a willingness to do some work in order to kind of get to that point. So I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah, tell us more about these. It's called a circle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us more about what does that look like? What is participating in that? What is that experience like?
Well, I mean, to me, it's like honestly one of the most interesting experiences. Again, if you've been in group therapy, it's not exactly like in terms of energy exchange, it's not exactly unlike group therapy, but the purpose is a little bit different. So in a circle process, I mean, and you can find, if you start looking around, you can find that there are a lot of different iterations of circle. There's lots of women's circles everywhere. There's lots of, I just find that there's kind of these pockets of places where people are doing various circles. For me, my training has been kind of rooted in the restorative justice, the world of restorative justice and the circle process that exists in that realm. But one of my most important trainings in circle was with a woman who was a shaman. And I don't think she meant for it to be a shamanic circle. That's not the training I went to. But what happened energetically in that circle was so powerful for me that I was able to witness what can happen in an exchange of energy collectively. So for me, when I am setting up a circle, you really are putting everybody at a level that exists for equality. So it's not like I'm showing up as the therapist and I'm somehow up here leading the group. I'm also a participant. So you have everybody sit around in an actual circle. I mean, if we do them virtually, we sort of have to imagine that there's a circle. But we use a talking piece. I don't know if you've, heard of opportunities where there's a talking piece, but it's not totally uncommon. And what you do is literally just pass the talking piece and take turns responding to a prompt. So the way that I would design a prompt is kind of to be most open-ended and to allow for the greatest opportunity for authenticity, but allowing people to have a choice of how deep they want to go. So, but what's so interesting about it is that you have this opportunity to speak a truth without having anybody respond. So if you have the talking piece, you're the only person that talks and everybody else just listens. So you're putting that truth out into the center. And sometimes we visualize like a fire or something. But you're putting your truth out there and it doesn't get responded to. You eliminate this whole interaction that happens in our everyday lives where people have a pressure to respond, to offer condolences, to project whatever feelings or thoughts they have on the situation. And instead, it just gets to be what it is. And then you pass it when you're finished, and the next person speaks their truth, and the next person, and the next person. And you have this really fascinating shift that you can see in how you are experiencing one another, but also what you learn just from listening to the experiences and the truth of other people. So it's really, really interesting. And it's sort of like you build this container where suddenly you experience what it feels like. As long as the container is set up safely, which is really important for me. But what you're doing is building the safety of the container that has maximum safety so that people actually begin to experience true authenticity in community with other people. I just don't feel like we have that space very often in the world where it's like your actual truth, not just the truth that you think people want to hear, not just the truth that's accepted, but your actual truth is invited to come out in community, and it's just held for what it is. So it's really beautiful to me. Yeah, you can see from my energy that it's one of the things that I love so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And gosh, there's so many like social constructs that make interacting more functional in building society, but less functional in connection as humans.
Yeah.
And some part of that is conversation, is that back and forth exchange. It's when you're saying something, we're not only thinking about what is the other person going to say back, but what am I going to say to that? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are they going to say back to that? And all of these conversations that kind of go on in our, it's one of my favorite things about counseling is that you can have this conversation, you can say the thing, and then it doesn't need to go anywhere. You don't need to do anything about it. You don't need to explain what it is. It just is, and that person isn't going to do anything with it. They're not going to argue it with you, right? They're not going to judge you on it. It's just, it is what it is, like you said. And what an interesting way of kind of bringing what the counseling field offers, which is you can say this stuff to a safe person versus you can say it to the group, because as human beings, in interacting with an individual person versus interacting with a group, it's a lot more complicated with a group, right? Like a lot of people, their biggest fear is public speaking, right? And talking in front of that group, because we're group pack herd animals. And so we are designed as humans to try to get the approval of the group. And that can be a scary thing in terms of survival, because if I go up on stage and I do something silly and the group does not approve of me, I could be out by myself, right? Survival wise. And so the idea that we could have what we can experience in therapy, where we can just be who we are and say what we're going to say, to be able to do that in a group and be that for another person while we're having it that experience is that sounds amazing. Being able to take those things off of the interaction, because those are all social constructs, right? That go into it, right? What does our body language look like, and do people like us, and all of that stuff. And being able to take all of that off and interact the way that toddlers interact, right? Before they've learned all of this is what we do and this is what we don't do. Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I spend, I think it's essential to you actually have to build the container so that it allows for people to get rid of some of those external things and really start tuning in. So I spend a lot of time on building group values, but also I have guidelines that I will use in any circle, and they're very basic. The two of them are to speak from the heart and to listen from the heart. And so what's so interesting in this is this sort of profound learning opportunity where you realize, especially at the beginning, maybe I have a prompt, and the initial reaction, which I think is very human, is to spend the time being like, okay, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? What am I going to say? Right? Which means that when you are in that space, you're not really listening, right? So you're not listening from the heart. But it also means that you're preparing for what you're going to say rather than actually speaking from the heart. So it's this really interesting opportunity to say, okay, what happens? What does it actually look like and feel like for you to not prepare what you're going to say, to listen truly to what other people are saying, and then when it's your turn, to trust that if you were to truly tune into your heart and speak from that space, that you would know what to say. And that often what you have to say or what you need or want to say is very different than what you would say if you spent all the time preparing. But why it's such a profound learning opportunity in these circles where people realize how much of the time they're really not listening and how difficult it is to really access the heart space to speak real truth that isn't connected to the ego that's telling you, you have to say this so that you don't make a fool, whatever.
Absolutely. We send out an example of these social constructs. I think that we that your groups are peeling away, I think, is every month we have a virtual team meeting.
I thought of the same thing when she was talking.
Yeah, and we get into these small groups and we share, what is your ideal place you would live, right? What is if you had to pick between chicken and fish forever, right? Like, what would you, I don't know, just random questions. But the anxiety level was so high coming into the small group and then saying what it was and just hearing the question right then, versus so we started saying, okay, well, we're going to send out the question the day before. So then, right? So you're not coming in feeling like, oh no, what am I going to say? My mind is going blank. And I think that in our society, we fear that mind going blank moment. We fear it. Like, we do everything we can to not have it and to not go, I don't know, I can't think of anything, right? Like, and even the I don't know, I can't think of anything is kind of protection. It's protecting us. Even just saying that is protecting us from actually having to speak and say the thing that we actually would say, right? Without going, oh man, let me run it through all of my filters. Let me run it through all of my scenarios. Who's in my group, right? All of that stuff. And being able to just say what it is in the moment. And I think what you're talking about is just true mindfulness, not being in the future of what am I going to say, not being in the past of, oh man, I said something stupid, this person is going to hate me, right? All of that stuff. We're just going, this is what I said, now I've said it. And the simplicity of that, I think, is so beautiful, because I think about the things that I'm teaching my 5-year-old and that my 5-year-old is learning at school, and all of it is about be cognitive, use your cognitive, right? It's behaviors first, behaviors are surface first, then it's your thoughts, then it's your feelings, and some people never go past the feelings stage, right? And then past feelings is being, right? Are there other levels in there? There probably are that I don't know. But in my mind, when I think about it, I go, okay, there's feelings and then there's being underneath that. And being is kind of that hardest level, because it doesn't feel the way that society wants us to be, right? Society wants us to be achievement based and do the right things and say the right things, and being doesn't do any of that. And so it feels scary to do.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, to me, it feels, to me, what it is about this feeling of safety in the world, and how much of the time there are these levels of interaction all the time. There's so many different levels, but so much of the time we don't really know what it feels like to be true, to feel truly safe in community with other people. And I mean, even in a one-on-one, in therapy, it takes a lot of work and effort to really create the space where somebody feels like, okay, I am safe enough to actually show up. Not just, like, you have to kind of bust through all of these different layers. But it takes a lot of work, and it's such a profound experience when you actually realize how much you've been guarding. So even when you think you're showing up authentically, realizing, oh no, actually, I'm still unsafe. I still feel like I can't say what's really true for me. So yeah, we do a lot of work on building up before we even get to the really deep places. Is like, I would take an entire session to say, let's make our guidelines for this group. We work on it and work on it and work on it until we have consensus, so that every single person in that group agrees with what it means to be safe in that space. So, and we don't accept any guidelines or any suggestions that every single person does not fully agree on. So we go through and we tweak the language and we talk through, okay, what does that actually mean? What happens when that happens? What shows up? And so we tweak it so that it's exactly a beautiful blueprint for each specific group. And so you're working from that framework, and then sort of starting to test the ground and be like, okay, so if we have this expectation and we all agree that this is what safety is, and I actually am safe, then who do I get to be? Who do I get to show up as? And it's, so safety to me is really interesting and such a complex experience. I just feel like I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I don't think so. I think that we often, even in our family systems, or even in our friendships, have ways where we don't really feel fully safe, or
Yeah. I mean, it's such a core need, safety. I mean, it's what all of our basic survival is based on, is safety, right? So like, we want to be near a water source because that's safety, right? Like, we want to be we want to be in a place that has fresh air because that's safety, right? That's what keeps us. And we want social safety, but it doesn't get put up there, right, with like shelter safety and food safety and air supply safety and water safety. We think about those things as being so necessary for our survival, and we understand that, yes, I feel food secure, yes, I feel water secure, yes, I feel like the air is safe to breathe here. We understand those things, but we don't go as much, I think, as a society into that feeling of, but what do I need in society? What do I need socially? Because like, we're social creatures. Like, it's a basic need that we're born with. It's the reason babies cry. It's the reason that we need to have that. But we don't think about that on the same level, right, as food. But it is just as deadly to be in isolation, right? We look at mental health diagnoses that take people's lives, right? And we look at the statistics on life expectancy, and a big factor in that is socialization and connection with other humans. And so, I would argue that it is just as high of a need to have that social safety, just like water safety. And I think I brought this up on last podcast, but I remember, Chrissa, do you remember, like, when Chrissa and I first started working together, I said to her a compliment that didn't sound like a compliment, but I said to her, when I'm with you, I feel like I'm alone. Which is like, doesn't sound like a compliment, but absolutely was like the best compliment that I could give, because trust is so important, and being able to be in a space and feel safe when you're in a space with somebody is so essential, and it's not that common. Like you said, even in our families, right? Even in our day-to-day world, that feeling of being safe, I'm different when I'm at home and it's just my husband and my kid here, right? Like, I'm just different. Somebody walks in the door, I'm different. And a lot of that is those protections that we put on ourselves to try to keep ourselves safe.
I totally agree. It's so interesting. And I think there's a space for all of it. I think that there's reasons why we do that. And I don't necessarily think that it's all maladaptive. But, I just also don't think that the invitation for us to be our true selves really exists very, very often in the world. Truest self. So that's a lot of the work that I'm doing. So there's the group, but also just this alignment and sort of maybe this sort of deconditioning process of being like, oh, well, if I took away all of the expectations of who people need me to be, who would I truly be? And what would it actually take for me to spend my life being that person?
Yeah, it's very intentional work that you're doing, and there's a huge need for that, because it's not as mainstream, right? Trying to meet that need for people. Bottled water and food they're the biggest industries out there, and fuel, right? So, but something like this, it's not adding, right? It's not production. It's taking away. It's taking away all of those things, and yeah, big food hasn't figured out how to do that, right? So you're doing it, and that's amazing, because that's so necessary. So that's how you do your groups, the circle groups, and then you also work individually with people. Do you tend to have people work individually and then also do groups as part of that practice, or how does that work for the people that you work with?
So at the moment, I'm working one-on-one primarily, but actually my goal is to do more groups. I think that there's something it's too important to me. The group process is too important to not have the opportunity. So when people are doing the reflective work, the internal work, to have that be seen to me is so important by other people and held by other people. Because I feel like so much of the time that is what people want too. They want to be seen. They want their experiences to matter. And each and every one of us has so much complexity that's going on in our internal landscape that it's painful to feel like we have so much there that nobody else can see. And again, I believe that there are some things that, maybe can be just belonging to you. And there's some beauty in that as well. But I think it's really valuable if people are doing this internal work and they're uncovering and they're seeing themselves differently. It can be really isolating to feel like you're making all of these shifts in the inside, but you don't really know who you can talk to about it, or who you can trust, or if it's acceptable. And I think that that's how you sort of breed shame. When you are looking at your life and all of a sudden feeling like, oh no, I don't know if this is the life that I actually wanted. I don't know if this is the marriage that I really wanted. Like sometimes they're really big experiences that show up, you uncover, and you're like, oh no, I have to make different changes. And you have two options, right? One is to step into that and to own it and to work through it and to even make the changes that maybe you need to make. And another is that you live with that inside of you, sort of festering and trying to push it down and pretend that it doesn't exist. And that's where suffering comes from in my opinion, right? Is where you're those places where you're not in alignment, where you're not really acknowledging what your intuition or your inner experience actually is. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, it's I love the individual work. I think it's important, but I just think there's something so beautiful about being able to share that with others, to be seen with that, and to be held when it's scary. Sometimes it's scary and it hurts. So
Absolutely. Yeah. It's that, the more often that you're with somebody, right, and drinking coffee and they don't poison your coffee, right, the more that you can trust that person. And I love what you're saying about individual work versus group work, because yes, you can do a lot of that shifting individually, But the piece that that sometimes could be missing or could be added to it is, okay, well, now I'm going to share that with other people, and those other people are not going to kill me or shun me or, or kick me out of the group. Like, that's having that experience of going, okay, other people heard me say that, like other people like watched me do that, right? And still accepted me as a valuable human. That's a powerful experience that in individual you don't always get, because I think our mind tends to go, well, it's one person, right? And our brains are so group focused that, society focused, social focused, that that our brains can easily go, well, that's one person who's being paid to talk to me, and like, this is their job and they're just good at it. And so having that experience of being able to say it to the group and then going, okay, now my mind knows that I have been able to say this to a group of people, and the group did not come at me with pitchforks, right? Like I'm Frankenstein, like they did what they did, right? So, yeah, I think that's such an important piece to be tying in when we're building safety, because that group is more representative of society as a whole than maybe one therapist that we talk to. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw this a lot with kids when I was doing my work as a school counselor, and it's just so interesting because it applies to everybody. There's this reality that the more you open up and share your authenticity, it gives other people permission to do the same. So, I'd work in my counseling office with kids, and you'd have, so many of these kids walking around feeling ashamed, feeling, embarrassed of who they were, and looking at the world and being like, nobody else feels this way. But actually everybody felt that way. Everybody felt that way. So if more people were honest about what's actually happening, you would have the community and the connection that you're actually looking for. It's that staying inside and keeping it secret and acting like there's, or not acting, but feeling, working from a place where you believe that there's something wrong with you, as opposed to you being exactly right, just as you are, but needing to own it in the world so that other people can also see it and own themselves. So if we're all walking around with these walls around us, then nobody gets to realize that we're all actually dealing with similar things. And we're not often that different in our suffering. So yeah, to me, there's something about just owning it. I think in therapy, again, I think it's an important phase, because sometimes you just need to speak it to somebody to start with, but also just keeping it in those four walls and never really speaking outside of that, or kind of taking it and integrating it into, your outside world. I think that can also kind of keep people a little bit stuck. You have to sort of change the system, and that takes some courage, and it takes a little bit of stepping out. Of course, that's what we try to do in therapy, is to get people to make those changes outside of the room. But I just think that group work is also useful for incorporating that and speaking it a little bit more loudly, and sort of embodying maybe the things that feel afraid, you feel afraid to say. But I also, I have this experience where I feel like every single person is actually exactly right, just the way that they are. And so much of the suffering is that we have been told that who we are, or our natural way of doing things, isn't right. It's supposed to be in this box. And so we're trained from a very young age, to make sure that you make decisions this way, and that the outcome is this way, and that you sit down this way, and that you don't do this, and your energy is this way. But actually, what if, and in fact, I believe we are designed exactly the way that we're supposed to be. So much of our suffering is that we're not living in the energy of who we're truly meant to be, or how we're truly meant to experience and interact with the world around us. So there's this wading through and sort of taking off layers that is really scary. So yeah, I noticed this a lot in the spiritual realm as well. When I think that this is another one of the collective shifts that's happening, but people are tuning into themselves spiritually in a different way. And a lot of times what they're noticing about themselves is different from maybe the religious beliefs that maybe perhaps they were growing up with. And I think that is a really scary space to be in. It's really isolating when you're kind of like, uh-oh, but I'm seeing things differently than the way that I'm supposed to. And I just feel like that's one of those areas where, there are tons of people that are actually feeling that way, tons of people who are experiencing changes inside of themselves, but feel like there's something wrong with them for doing it, for wanting to go about it differently or viewing themselves differently in the world, maybe secretly exploring other spiritual concepts, or secretly being interested in things like manifestation, that seem like completely out of the norm, and like they shouldn't be entertaining that kind of thing. But actually, once you start to say it, all these other people are like, oh, me too. So that's one of the things that I've noticed a lot. But one of the areas where I'm particularly interested is that sort of spiritual awakening process that I think can be really overwhelming, really scary, and very isolating for people.
There's a movie called Finding Joe. Do you know this one, Finding Joe?
I don't.
It's awesome. And the premise is that all of the world's religions, all of the spiritual texts and the holy texts can be kind of boiled down to one. There's a lot of detail and there's a lot of differences, but can be kind of boiled down to this idea of the hero's journey and the golden Buddha, and that every, like, in our culture, the stories that we are obsessed with, there's like Harry Potter, Star Wars, Marvel comic stories, nothing that Chrissa likes. But she has not seen any of those, or if she did, she didn't like them. But these are the popular, Hunger Games and what's the vampire one? Twilight. That these stories, and even older stories, are fairy tales that we grew up with, are that they can all kind of be boiled down to the hero's journey, which is the hero, that we're all the hero in our own story, and that our life and our journey and where we can find purpose is we go in the stories. It's shown as we go out, right, into a different world. We come out from under the staircase, right, and we go out to Hogwarts, right? So we go out to something else, something new. We learn about ourselves there, and then we come back, and we bring it back, and now we're different, right, when we come back home, the coming home part. And so, but really what the movie is saying, and this person is saying, is that really the reason we like those stories is because it's actually about us. Like, we're the place. Like, we're coming out from under the stairwell in Harry Potter's little cupboard bedroom. We're coming out there, we're going inward, and that's the place. That's the place where we're fighting dragons, and that's the place where we're, learning how to fly and fight villains and all, like that. It's our internal world that we're going to. And then when we come back out to our conscious surface, I'm having a conversation with you level, and we're changed, because and so the coming home is really like the coming into our day-to-day. I'm going to go pick up my kid. I'm going to go on this meeting, right? We're coming back into that, but because we've gone inside and gone on that hero's journey, we're different. We show up differently in our day-to-day life. And another piece of that is that what you're talking about is so true. It's the golden Buddha, right? That we're all the golden Buddha, and that there's all of this mud and cement and twigs and just crap piled onto us. And our purpose, our process is chipping away at all of that stuff that's not us. That it's inside of us. It's not out there, right? It's not the next place I'm going to live. It's not the next house I'm going to live in. It's not the next job I'm going to have. It's not the next child I'm going to have. It's within us already. And it's just the process of taking off all of that stuff, right? That we've piled on, or that have been piled onto us over the years. So finding Joe very in line with, I think, a lot of the things that you're saying, which really helped me really to understand a lot of those things as well, coming into this new. So yeah, really, really cool. I love what you're talking about in terms of, that what is there, what's under the surface there, and how do we get that to show up in our day to day?
Yeah, and changing the narrative. Like, I think that's part of the thing, is that a lot of people sort of walk around believing that part that's underneath it all is somehow the wrong thing. And instead actually realizing that when you get rid of all of the other stuff, it's actually exactly the right thing. So I think that's kind of this, it's the stuff on top that's the problem. It's not the golden Buddha inside. It's all of the other stuff that all these other people are saying, but I've got all this stuff on me, so it must mean that there's something wrong, or whatever it is that's hidden under there is somehow not right, or whatever. So it is just also learning and choosing, I think, to believe that the person that you are, this sort of, there's a woman that I follow, Karen Curry Parker. I'm interested in human design, so I'm learning it, but she talks about how we as human beings are a once in a lifetime cosmic event. Us being here alive on this planet is a once in a lifetime cosmic event. You as you are is exactly right. You are here for a purpose. There's nothing wrong with you. You are exactly right. It's you thinking that you're not right that's the problem. So it's just such a, and I think that that's part of being human. I think that's part of our human experience and the process of our lives, is to kind of get to this point where we're starting to uncover and starting to explore what all exists and what our true purpose is, why we are here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of that, I think, that stuff that gets piled onto us, right, is that I was a kid in elementary school who tap danced to the lunchroom, and that was not allowed. Right. And I always kind of think of that example, because my 5-year-old does all kinds of things that I'm like, no, stop doing that. Right. And it's because I think a lot of our parents, right, we do it with great intentions. I don't want her to be meowing at kids on the playground. Okay. I want her to be able to interact with people. Right. But all of that is what it does sometimes send that message of, you are not okay because your impulse was to meow at that other person. And that's not what we do as humans, is to meow at somebody else, right? So I'll say, don't meow at that other kid. But the secondary messaging, right, can so often be, oh, well, I can't trust my own impulse on how to interact with that person. Like in this moment, I felt like meowing at that person. But my mom says, nope, don't do that. Right. And my mom's fears of, that's dangerous to not know how to control the impulse to meow at a person, right? Like my stuff as mom comes out gets transferred in what I say to her, which is like, no, just ask them what their name is, right? Don't meow at them. Don't hiss at them. Like, no, right? Because my fears come out of I want her to make friends at school. I don't want her to be like the weird meowing kid, right? And because I was the weird kid in that way, right? For so many things. And so I don't want that. My fear comes out. I say that to her. And the secondary messaging of that, or the way that she can very easily interpret that, is I can't trust my instincts of what to do, right? I need to be corrected. I need to be changed to be okay in this situation. And so I need to ignore the impulse to meow at this other person, which that impulse, I'm fine with her fighting. But there are going to be other impulses, other times in her life where she is going to need to trust her gut reaction, right? This is not a safe person to be in a relationship with. This is not this is a dangerous situation, right? And so there are going to be times where she's going to have to like be rude to a stranger at a bar. And I want her to be able to do that if that's her instinct in that moment to stay safe. And so it's such a balancing act as a parent to try like to understand that stuff, but also go like, I need you to pass kindergarten though, buddy. You know? And but we can kind of see where it comes from, right? Like it is best intentions, but where we grow up going like, oh, I can't trust what I would naturally do.
Yeah, totally. And I just think, I mean, what you're saying, I just like feel so deeply in my heart. I know it so well. I've encountered it so many times with kids and parents, but I do think it's part of the process as well. I mean, it's all part of being human. So you as a parent and then as a child, all of those things, it's impossible to do it exactly right. But it's why it's also so important for parents to be checking themselves, right? So recognizing, like you're saying, recognizing where it might be that your stuff is actually showing up in that moment, and I think that it's just another reason for people to be doing their own work, for going to therapy, for understanding themselves, for recognizing what exists within them, because it does show up, and it shows up in really clever and sneaky ways. So yeah, and I just think it's so complicated. I think parenting is this whole complex process, and so is growing up, So, but the more in tune or aware you are of your own responses and reactions and insecurities and fears, then the more at least balanced you can be about how you are responding to your children.
So, so your favorite quote that you shared with us is, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." And I think that just speaks so well to everything that you've shared with us today as well. Where does this quote come from, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, it's a quote by Rumi. He's a beautiful poet. I don't know. To me, I guess it sort of connects into the idea that we are enough just as we are. So I think that that's sort of, again, what we've along the lines of what we've been talking about, where so often we're walking around thinking that we're this small creature in a big planet that has no impact and is unseen and invaluable, when in actuality, it's like everything that exists within us impacts the whole. So if you are believing that you're here for a purpose, and if you believe that you have some essential purpose on this planet, it's for the collective. It's for all of us, that you are actually tapping into that part of yourself, being that person, showing up as that person. We all benefit from you being your authentic self. So you aren't just something in the middle of nothing. You are everything. You are the most beautiful thing. You are all of it. So I know it's a little like dramatic and poetic, but like it is really how I feel. I love the image of being the entire ocean in a drop, that you already encompass all of it.
Absolutely. It brings to mind too the idea of, each individual soul, and there's all these connotations when you say the word soul, but each individual soul being as creator, right? And I love this quote. This quote really speaks to that too. The amount of impact, right, that we do have, and we always think about our behaviors and our words as having the impact, but our energy, our intentions, have such an impact as well on creating the world around us. So yeah, beautiful. So if you could give one suggestion to somebody kind of on the fence about either starting counseling or doing individual one-on-one coaching or group, what suggestion might you give to that person?
I feel like what I would want to say is that it's not as scary as it sounds. I think there's something, it feels so, again, it feels like such a vulnerable position to kind of choose to step into a place with somebody that you don't know, and sort of open yourself up. I think it's terribly intimidating when you haven't experienced it. But when you are with the right therapist, when you're in the right space, it is the most powerful and the most pleasant experience of all to have who you are just held and just accepted. And I know that it's difficult to trust that that's possible, but it is possible. And in fact, it's beneficial for you and for the collective to take that step. So it is hard work sometimes, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, but I think the release that is felt when you actually do let go of some of what you've been kind of carrying on is so profoundly, I don't even know what the right word is. It's just so profoundly relieving and beautiful that it's hard to recognize it before you've actually experienced it. So I say take the risk, and that the benefit is by far outweighs the negative.
Absolutely. I love that. It is scary to be vulnerable, and I love what you're saying there, that it's worth it on the other side. It is uphill, but there's a downside of that hill, where it's worth it. So love that. Wonderful. Well, Stephanie, how can people find you if they want to work individually with you, or if they want to join one of your groups? How do they connect with you?
Sure. So right now, my website is under construction. It would be stephanieannressler.com. The easiest way to find me right now is either on Instagram. So it's Stephanie Ressler _coaching. But I also have a Facebook group called the Collective Spirit Inner Circle. And so that's where we have lots of conversations about circles, but also just everything. If you're interested in the sort of spiritual conversations, then that's where we're at with things. So kind of that exploration stuff. So I do a lot of working with different modalities, introducing different modalities and trying to, like tapping, emotional freedom technique, or talking about human design, or any of those things. So if you sort of have a curiosity in that realm, then it might be a great space to join. But if not, then you can follow me on Instagram and just see what I'm up to and when I'm posting offers and when I have availability.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We will put all of those links in the show notes as well.
I'm Stephanie Ressler, and I need a counselor.
Awesome. Me too. So does Chrissa. We all do. Everybody can benefit. Love that. Okay, if you are in the Iowa area, give us a call for mental health counseling or for behavioral health in-home counseling for your kiddos. So if you are a parent and are interested in individual services for yourself and services for your kiddo, give us a call, 800-531-4236, or you can visit us on Facebook or Instagram at Heart and Solutions. And you can find us at www.heartandsolutions.net.
And like Julie mentioned at the beginning, we post every Sunday night at 5 p.m. Central. So save up that laundry or meal prepping or whatever task you don't like doing and do it Sunday night while you listen to us in our new episode. And then we can help get you ready to call a counselor and get set up the services that week for yourself as well. And if you have any questions for us, you can reach us on Facebook or on Instagram at You Need a Counselor Podcast and send us a message or DM us on there as well. So I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Bye.
Bye.